Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome. The air conditioning just kicked in. Oh, awesome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Janet Marin. I'm the Chief Librarian here at the Prince George Public Library, and I'm really pleased to welcome you all this evening. I would also like to welcome all of the candidates who are able to be with us tonight. Thank you very much. We're very pleased to partner with CBC Radio 1, Daybreak North, to bring you tonight's Cariboo-Prince George riding federal candidate debate. Last year, we had a great crowd attending the local mayoral debate at the library, and we consider that encouraging this engagement is a great way to increase our civic literacy and to address the issues that are important to all of us in our communities. If you feel really crowded in this room tonight, as Russell mentioned earlier, or if you've just come in, please note the event is also being streamed upstairs in our Skylab. You're welcome to go up there to watch or log in from your home computer. And also, after tonight's event, if you'd like more information about registering to vote, staff from Elections Canada are going to be on site here at the library tomorrow between 2 and 6, helping people to register and giving out information about where to vote and when to vote. So without further ado, we're going to get underway here. I'd like to introduce our moderator for tonight's debate, and that's Mr. Russell Bowers, the host of CBC Radio 1's Daybreak North Morning Show. Thanks, Russell.
Thank you, Janet. Well, it's going to be an interesting evening. I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing here tonight because obviously it's important. And I also want to recognize that we are also on the territory of the Tsilhqot'in, and many thanks to them, and many thanks to the library for being such gracious hosts and permitting us in their space tonight. Just a bit of a few notes before we get underway here this evening, and that's if you have smartphones or cell phones, we invite you to turn them on. And obviously turn them to silent, but if you're on Facebook or Twitter or any of the social media, you can certainly get involved with the debate tonight by letting people know what's happening on YouTube and posting any comments or anything you like about what you hear tonight. And we are going to have each of the candidates speaking in turn. We're going to try and limit the crosstalk if we can. And at the same time, if you hear something that you'd like to respond to, we ask you to be respectful to all 5 candidates. And just as a way of letting you know what's happening where, there's exits over here. There's exits at the back of the room. And the washrooms are over by the green wall. And let's see, what else can I tell you? That's about it. So it's on to tonight's debate, basically. So regardless of what happens on October 19th, one thing is certain. The riding of Cariboo-Prince George will be getting a new member of Parliament. Now, for over 2 decades, this riding and the ones that preceded it were represented by Dick Harris, first as a member of the Reform Party, then the Canadian Alliance, and the modern-day Conservative Party. And during that time, this riding came to be considered fairly safe for the Conservative Party. That's not the case in this election. If you look at the polls, it seems to indicate that 60 to 65% of this riding favor a change from the governing Conservatives. It's been identified as a swing riding by groups including the Assembly of First Nations, and polls are indicating no clear leader at this point. So if it's the case that 60% of the riding want a change, then the 5 people we have on the dais with us tonight represent that change. For this debate, we've decided to focus on 4 key areas: the economy and the environment, a focus on the relationship with First Nations, the federal government's relationship with cities and infrastructure projects. And our final section will be focused on representing this riding. Now, the candidates were informed about the topics for tonight's debate, but they don't know the specific questions. And so with all 7 candidates running in the riding, I just want to tell you about the 5 that are here and the other 2 that were unable to join us tonight. First of all, on my immediate left, running as an independent, Sheldon Clare. Next to him is Trent Derrick of the NDP. From the Liberal Party, Tracy Collageros. Richard Jakes of the Green Party, and Adam DeCrone of the Christian Heritage Party. And if you wouldn't mind, a round of applause for all of our candidates. And we did send out invitations to all 7 people running in the riding. Unfortunately, some of them can't be here, so I just want to acknowledge that Todd Doherty, running for the Conservative Party, wasn't able to join us tonight, and Gordon Campbell, not that Gordon Campbell, from Williams Lake, is running as an unaffiliated candidate, and he was also unable to be here tonight. So, the rules. We drew some numbers randomly to determine the order in which the candidates would be seated and the order in which they'll be speaking. And so the first candidate to speak is closest to me, and then so on down the line. And each candidate will be given equal time to respond to questions, and there won't be time necessarily for rebuttals unless candidate levels of criticism directly at another candidate. We will give an opportunity to respond in those instances. And by the way, candidates, if you're unsure of a question I've asked and you need clarification, please do feel free to ask. It's a 2-minute time limit for statements and answers. There's cards that will indicate their times, and I just want to introduce someone else on the team here who's going to help out tonight. In fact, he's wearing a number of different hats. He's handling the sound, he's handling the organization, he's taping down wires, and he's going to handle the cards tonight. From CBC, Mr. Andrew Curiata. And you'll have 2 minutes, and I'll say at the outset, I know I told you all of this earlier, but you don't have to use 2 minutes if you've effectively said what you had to say inside of that. But you're politicians, I know. You can use your time wisely, not up. I will tell you that you will get a 30-second warning, and that's a yellow card. Andrew, do you want to show them the yellow card? And you'll get a red card when there's 10 seconds. And if we have to sound a bell, you'll be sent off. So, with that all being said, let's start with opening statements, shall we? And just a reminder for those of you who are there in the back of the room, hello, thanks for coming. Sorry you couldn't be here earlier. We had seats, but obviously. So for those of you who are outside, if you can hear me, we do have the opportunity for you to watch the forum upstairs in the Skylab. There's some seating up there and some televisions, and you'll be able to hear and see the debate up there. So anyone wants to make themselves comfortable, feel free. And there they go. All right, so let's begin with the opening statements. Again, 2 minutes each, and I'll begin with the independent, Sheldon Clare.
Thank you. I just want to say, first off, it's a real pleasure for me to be in the Keith Gordon room. Keith Gordon was one of my high school teachers, and it makes me feel very good to know that his name lives on, and the legacy that he brought to this community lives on by having this room named after him. Well, I'm running as an independent, and the reason I'm running as an independent is because I don't fit into any of the boxes of the traditional parties. I like to read legislation myself and make up my own mind, and I like to think that when I'm your member of Parliament, what I'm going to do is read legislation and make my decisions based on what's best for the people of Cariboo-Prince George and Canada. I'm not going to have a party whip cracking at me to vote and use talking points to come back to these communities out here and deliver Ottawa's message to you. I want to take your message to Ottawa. I want to be your member of Parliament doing that. I believe in a diversified economy. I think we've been spending far too much time not bringing value to the materials that we export. I think that we need to be concentrating on our renewable resources and not relying so heavily on the non-renewable ones. I believe that agriculture needs some attention paid to it. The Trans-Pacific agreement that has been proposed is something that's very of deep concern to agriculture. And I know that the farmers in Williams Lake, the people who are milk producers, the people who have got cattle are very concerned. The environment is, of course, important, and a sustainable environment with a sustainable economy is certainly something we can do. First Nations issues, of course, are paramount. A very fast-growing population. Education is the key to making sure that all of our people get the economic benefits that they need. And on October 19th, I want you to vote independent. Vote for Sheldon Clare. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheldon. And up next, our second speaker is Trent Derrick of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you all for coming, and you organizers of this forum. For me, this election is about your priorities. Having crisscrossed this riding, meeting with people in coffee shops and on the doors from all walks of life, the message is clear: it's time for change. The issues raised are critical to our future in this region. Healthcare, education, veterans, our economy, and our youth have all been ignored by the Conservatives over the past 10 years. We are becoming a country that's lost its way, both with its citizens and within the world stage. As a small businessman, both my wife and I understand the struggles and difficulties that can be encountered. But for workers that have lost their jobs or feel the employment threatened, seniors, veterans, it's even more of a struggle because they are the neglected ones. Not banks or multinational corporations with the lowest tax rates in North America. Increasing the corporate tax rate, we will still have the lowest rate in the Western world. Asking them to start paying their fair share and take some of the burden off your backs is a reasonable approach. We have an opportunity in this election to turn the page on 150 years of Liberal and Conservative failed promises and commitments. We have the opportunity to bring back a Canada we can be proud of, one that reflects the concerns of its citizens, communities, provinces, and territories. Our economy needs stability, leadership, and a leadership that's focused on working as a team, reaching out to businesses, communities, provinces, First Nations, and labor by building a coalition of partners with an objective of creating opportunities for employment and growth by embracing innovative plans of creating jobs from our vast resources, just not exporting them for others to manufacturers. And we will invest in our crumbling infrastructure. I am running to represent you, not because I need a job, but because I believe you're ready to work with me as your NDP Member of Parliament in Cariboo-Prince George and our team leader, Tom Mulcair. It's time for change, we're ready, and we are the party to beat Harper and the Conservatives. Thank you.
And next, it's our third speaker, Tracy Collageros from the Liberal Party.
Pretty good work on the name. I'm impressed. So thanks for coming out tonight, guys. My name is Tracy Collageros, and I say it the way my mother-in-law taught me, so I always make sure it's got the soft GH. I've spent the last 22 years at the Exploration Place Museum and Science Centre here in Prince George, and I have done a variety of jobs within that organization, but I've been the CEO since 2003. When I stepped into that role, the museum had just gone through an expansion project and a rebranding, and it was saddled with about $1.3 million in debt and a $100,000 operating deficit. Flash forward 13 years, and we've eliminated that operating deficit, grown entrepreneur profit centers within the organization, and we are now operating at a very sustainable level going into the future. I think that the model that has worked there is one of partnership and one of consultation. We are the designated repository for the Tsilhqot'in, and I can tell you that my museum colleagues across the country are jealous of that relationship, and it's taken 20 years to build. Trust is important with the First Nations, and trust is important with anyone that you're going to do business with. Canada is headed into a minority government. I think pretty much everyone has accepted that, and judging by the crowd that's in this room, pretty much all of us are after change. It may be 60% of the riding, but 100% of the people at this table are looking for change. What's really important in a minority government is who you send to Ottawa. It doesn't really matter so much which lapel or logos on the lapel. It's the person. You need a communicator. You need someone that's good at building collaborative and collegial relationships, and that someone is me. Trent will tell you that the NDP are the only ones situated to beat Mr. Harper. The polls don't play him out, and while I'm not a big believer in polls, I do like them when we're in the lead. But I think what's most important is making sure that we select someone that we trust and someone that we know is going to be able to take our message to Ottawa, not the other way around. Thank you.
Our fourth speaker is from the Green Party, Mr. Richard Jacks.
It's actually Jake's, but
sorry.
that's okay.
I almost got all of them.
I know,
sorry.
you're doing pretty good, actually. Thanks for, not bad. He's doing okay. My name is Richard Jakes, and I am the Green Party candidate for Cariboo-Prince George. I am very happy to be here and very happy to see the other 60% sitting out here in the crowd. At the end of the day, on October 19th, one of us will be your representative. Hopefully it's me. But then again, there's four other choices sitting at the table here, so we're going to give it our best tonight to answer your questions. A little bit more about me. I first came to the Cariboo. The RCMP had sent me to this wonderful little town called Fort St. James. Myself and Mike Morris do share something in common. That was our very first posting. After that, I moved north into Tsilhqot'in and eventually Tsilhqot'in, Prince George. After that, I followed the Prime Minister around for 2 tours. I was with his detail, and eventually retired from the RCMP in 2008. The Cariboo, I tried to escape the Cariboo about 2001, but something happened along the way. I met this beautiful, beautiful woman from Williams Lake, British Columbia, and in 2002 I was married in Williams Lake and haven't left since. Once you're married to someone in the Cariboo, you're part of the Cariboo, and I've been coming back ever since. Some of the issues we're going to be talking tonight are obviously our Bill C-51 is going to be on the table. I know we all want to talk about that. The other being the veterans. Myself being a third-generation veteran, I'm going to speak to that. Another thing that has come across the table from past debates is the allowable cut, the economy, and jobs that are going to be cut because of the allowable cut dropping in certain areas. Other things are the GST and the infrastructure input that the Green Party is proposing, putting $6.4 billion back into municipal infrastructure from the GST itself, and of course tuition. So we'll move on, and thank you once again for coming. I look forward to answering the questions. I'm glad that you're all here and look forward to the rest of the evening. Thank you.
And finally, our last speaker is Adam de Crone of the Christian Heritage Party.
My name's Adam de Crone. I'm the candidate this time around for the Christian Heritage Party. I've lived in Quesnel basically my entire life. Last 3 years, Monday to Friday, I've been a student taking a degree in computer science. And on the weekends, I work at West Fraser's sawmill in Quesnel, the highest producing sawmill in the world as of last year. Working in the sawmill, I come into contact with a lot of working class people, and I know that people are concerned about the economy and the way it's going with jobs. I think we need to stop exporting all our raw resources overseas and create value-added products here in Canada by refining those resources here. If we refine those resources here, those are jobs that can stay here. Another core component of my platform is that I'm against government intrusion into privacy and freedom. And while the most known example of that is Bill C-51, it's not just Bill C-51. The last 4 years that the Conservatives have been in government, they've continually been pushing through legislation similar to Bill C-51 and including it. But it's not just Bill C-51. If anyone told you it was just Bill C-51, they'd be wrong. There's Bill C-13. It's equally concerning in its own ways. And I think the Conservatives' intrusion into people's privacy and freedom needs to stop. I also have good policies for students, including tuition caps and other policies we'll be talking about in the night, during the night for seniors and the environment. So October 19, I look forward to your vote. Vote Adam de Crone.
And certainly we want to take a moment to congratulate each of these candidates, all 7 candidates really, for offering themselves up for public office. It's a very brave and not an easy thing to do, to take time out of your life, out of your personal and work life to do something like this. So congratulations and best wishes to all of you. All right, so we're going to move on with our first question of the night, and it deals with the economy and the environment. And many say this is a riding where those two go hand in hand. But sometimes, as we all know, they do often come into conflict with each other as well. Now, nowhere was that made more clear than in the community of Likely last year, when the Mount Polley mine tailings pond collapsed, spilling toxic wastewater into fresh water nearby. But mining is still a major driver of the local economy. Hundreds of tailings ponds across the province are in use. So my question for each of the candidates: what role do you believe the federal government has and will you have in ensuring a disaster like the one at Mount Polley doesn't occur again? And Sheldon Clare, I'll let you begin the answering.
Thank you. I think something that could easily be done to make sure that polluters are required to pay for the damages they cause is, first of all, look at the track record of companies that are allowed to be able to develop our resources. Secondly, something that might be considered is once a corporate tax rate has been set, why not think about having a penalty assessed for bad corporate behavior and corporate tax breaks provided for good corporate behavior? So you have a base rate and you make adjustments based upon behavior. If somebody is a corporate bad player, then you perhaps consider giving them a bit of a break. If they're doing well, they're contributing to the community, providing lots of jobs, maybe their tax rate might be a little bit lower. I think that kind of incentive would do well to prevent a lot of the problems we've seen with sloppy work in terms of letting corporations get away with their polluting ways. I think that's about one of the major things I can think of to assist in that. That would help with the economy at the same time as it would help to protect the environment. We've got to make it clear. People need to work, and they need to work in jobs that are not just about social infrastructure. It has to be jobs that build and contribute to our society and economy as well. But that must protect where we live. That's why we live here.
Trent.
Well, a couple days ago, I was up in Likely area, and I have to admit that was a horrific disaster that never received much attention from the Harper government. We need to be more proactive in developing of our resources and bring back support staff to assist in the monitoring, inspection, and scientific experts involved in the development to prevent such disasters, all which have been cut under the Harper government. The NDP will bring these back, and we will support. We do believe in resource development. We do believe in supporting green initiatives, but we need to work together, and you need investing in research, development, and re-putting our funds into Environmental Canada and their inspectors. Thank you.
Tracy.
Canada is a resource economy. We always have been, and if we stopped using our resources tomorrow, our economy would be in big trouble. But the fact of the matter is, this is the 21st century, and economies and success of industry can no longer be defined simply by the dollars and cents you're putting in your jeans at the end of the day. We have to look at a triple bottom line. And in order to do that, we have to look not only at the fiscal component of success, but also the social and the ecological components of success. I support responsible resource development, but it requires a social license to be able to move forward. And that means that we need to get everybody at the table and everybody talking. And if you're going to have a conversation, you better base it on real science. And I know firsthand that this government has literally waged a war on science. So we're 10 years out of date. We don't have any contemporary fact-based evidence with which to go forward when we're talking about how to avoid future disasters or how to even do any future development. So the federal government's role has to be to refund science and to refund scientists and to allow the results to come out and be public domain, whether they agree with the government's particular position on a given industry or not. Because it can't just be about the position going in. If it's going to be true consultation, we need to be able to go in with an open mind and think that there's going to be some instances where we're never going to find approval for whatever the initial impetus was for the discussion. So I think that's the role of the federal government. My job as an MP is to make certain that that consultation happens broadly and that all of the information that's necessary for the consultation is available for the people that are sitting around the table. Thank you.
And just a quick note for each of the speakers, just make sure you get a little closer to the microphone. That way we get a little less of the feedback in the room. So as best you can. Richard.
Oh, thank you. The Mount Polley, I was out there. I was at a meeting with the Mount Polley people and the Uxall First Nation. And I listened to their presentation over an hour. We had a salmon barbecue, and there was a lot of information passed back and forth. Chief Anna Louie from Williams Lake Band asked a lot of pointed questions, and a lot of them had to do with the 10 meters of debris that is still at the bottom of Quesnel Lake. A lot of it still contains mercury and cesium down at the bottom, which are heavy metals. Now, federally, the federal government looks after environmental regulation. That's where that sits. And the federal government has to reinstate federal regulations to look after our waterways, our fish, and our endangered wildlife. Provincially, the water standards are regulated provincially. Now, this is where the problem with Mount Polley arises. Mount Polley is depending on provincial regulation and provincial policy. Unfortunately, heavy metals are not included in provincial water quality, and which are being completely exempted from the reports. There are high volumes of this mercury and cerium in the bottom of the lake. So they do have a plan to release another 4 million gallons down toward Quesnel. They do have a plan in place to make sure it's 80% clean, and they're cleaning it at the top end. I said, well, that's all great and wonderful, but why don't you put another plant at the bottom end and get rid of the other 20% before you put it back into Quesnel Lake? So moving forward, the Green Party is looking toward putting back our environmental regulations where they belong to protect our environment moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Last word on this question to Adam.
I believe a key thing going forward is going to be implementing fines for corporations that pollute our environment. Typically, corporations that pollute our environment get away with less than a slap on the wrist, and I don't think this is acceptable to any of us that live in this region. I believe that Mount Polley could have been avoided had they taken proper care of it, and so I believe implementing fines for corporations that are negligent would help to reduce this kind of thing happening in the future.
Thank you, Adam. All right, so we'll move on to our second question. I'll give Trent the opportunity to start this question, but just so you don't get too comfortable, I will randomize who goes next. Of course, Prince George, the Cariboo, is a place in a city built on forestry. And certainly we're feeling the repercussions of the mountain pine beetle over a decade after it first made headlines. And just last year, Canfor closed its mill in Quesnel, putting 209 employees out of work. We asked Mayor Bob Simpson of Quesnel for a question for tonight's candidates, and he gave us this. What role do you believe the federal government should play in assisting BC to address the negative impacts the mountain pine beetle epidemic has had on the forest sector? That includes monetary assistance, research, and of course anywhere else that you see the federal government taking a role. So again, what do you believe the federal government should play, or what role do you believe they should play in assisting BC to address the negative impacts of the mountain pine beetle epidemic on the forest sector? Trent, I'll let you begin.
Yeah, well, the Harper government has promised over $1 billion, which was never received. We got about $200 million with that. But part of that was actually we got to develop some strategies and listen to a bunch of experts on what we can do. Unfortunately, a lot of those got put onto the shelf. So we do have plans and strategies that have already been paid for. What the NDP will do is we want to implement those, get the stakeholders back at the table, start listening, and implement a strategy. We also have what we want to do is also implement funding for our manufacturing as well. And one of the reasons why we want to do that is that we want to put it into innovation and research. As we said, as Richard said, they're going to have a limited, their cutbacks on our allowable cut. With that, what we need to start doing is focusing on creating more jobs per log with that. Under the current format of the TPP, some of it that's come out is that they want to release the restrictions on the forest industry. So that means selling more raw logs for export. And that's not good for our economy. So what we do need to do is look into that, get more value for our jobs one at a time. Thank you.
Most of the rules and regulation around forestry and allowable cuts are provincial. So they are outside of the jurisdiction of the federal government. Where the federal government fits in is looking at diversification both within the industry and away from the industry. So I've talked to Bob Simpson, and he's passionate about West Fraser Mills and their interest in diversifying their own operation into other products, added value products, and really making full use of the forest industry within the Quesnel area. 2018 is when they are forecasting that they're going to be running out of beetlewood. Talked a long time with Brett Robinson at Canfor as well, and they've got some really innovative, brilliant ideas around cogeneration and some alternative energy projects. So the federal government can come in with information as well as research and funding for tech startups, for innovation, for green energy. And I think that when we look at the role the feds can play, really it's about bringing money to the table to free up those people within the communities that have always worked with wood to find new ways to work with wood. The allowable cut, as I said, it's primarily a provincial jurisdictional area, and that the federal government's role could be, I suppose, as an honest broker of bringing people to the table and trying to negotiate. But I think if we fund the innovators that are in our communities, they're going to solve the problems. We just need to give them the resources they need to be able to get out there and implement their ideas. Thank you.
We'll go to Adam next. Adam.
I think funding is definitely key. Like Trent had mentioned, the Conservative governments had pledged a lot more money to pine beetle in this area than they actually had given. So I think funding is definitely key, and that's one way that government can help. But at the same time, also economic diversification will help lessen the impact that the pine beetle will have on our forest industry. If we diversify into manufacturing and other sectors and move away from solely timber, that would lessen the economic impact of that. Also, using pine beetle wood, like Tracy mentioned, the company I work for, West Fraser, we do use pine beetle wood. I believe we can make full use of that. We turn it into hog and other wood materials that are used for various things, including MDF. So there's definitely good solutions there. But at the end of the day, I would say funding is key, and that's where the federal government could play the biggest role.
Sheldon. Sheldon, we'll go to Sheldon next.
Sure. Well, I think it's pretty clear that what needs to happen is that we really have to have a better strategy of dealing with these types of disasters. The role of the federal government, I think, is to make sure that the monies needed to educate people in these communities is properly allocated and not just sent to the provinces for distribution without some more direction on those transfer payments. Education is really the key here. Getting people to diversify and be able to adapt to a rapidly changing economic situation is a critical part of it. When I listen to my forestry students who are learning to write reports and papers, they tell me one of the biggest effects upon this region, and the pine beetle is merely one indicator of that, is the climate change that allowed the pine beetle to develop and spread in the first place. And this is a factor that the federal government really needs to start paying more attention to. All of the cuts to research, the cuts to the National Archives. As a historian, I found that particularly egregious. All of these sorts of things are all contributing to these kinds of problems. It's not just about forestry, folks. It's about an integrated economy that needs an integrated solution. And as your member of parliament, I'm going to work with whoever I can to make sure that we have the best deals for Cariboo-Prince George to make sure that our economy works for everybody.
Thank you. And the final word to Richard.
Thank you. The pine beetle crisis, yeah, I've spoken to this one quite a few times. Being a member of the Green Party, Elizabeth makes sure that we do our readings about the science, the allowable cuts, and make sure we have the numbers in hand. I can tell you for the Williams Lake area and the 100-mile area, the allowable cut went from 5.77 million down to 3 million. Out of that, only 1.5 million is live. The other 1.5 million is dead wood. Beetle kill in 2006, the federal Conservative government promised $1 billion toward the beetle crisis in British Columbia. Trent is right, only about 200 million of that ever made it to the Cariboo, or about 1/5. What had happened when the funding didn't arrive, the trees died. They lost their value over time, so we went into 2007, 2008, 2009. So by the time we're getting to the wood, it is... It's okay. Let's get Thank you, Sheldon. Yeah, the wood itself lost its value. Now, my father-in-law used to work in a mill, and I've talked to a lot of people who work in mills, and the thing about dead wood, it is dangerous. It is dry and it's dangerous, and in order to reinvigorate the industry, we're going to have to process this wood. And what I look at is dust is dangerous. We don't want a repeat of Lakeland and or Burns Lake. We do want to save the jobs in our mills, but we have to process this wood. And moving into Parliament, I'm not going to let this be forgotten. There is a lot of beetle wood out there, and it can be processed, and we want to process it safely and protect our workers from the dust or any explosions that might harm their health. Mill safety is important. The other thing that people are forgetting is the Tsilhqot'in decision. Now, you got to remember that 143,870 acres is outside the allowable cut, which is in the Williams Lake District. Now, Elizabeth May met with the Tsilhqot'in chiefs in Vancouver last couple of days, discussing and putting it on the table now to start a working relationship so that they can share those resources and put that wood into the mills in Williams Lake and 100 Mile and look after the First Nations and the workers in those mills. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. All right, so just a quick reminder we're going to move on to our second topic now, and the topic of First Nations relationships. And just for those of you in the room, just a reminder to any latecomers that if you're in the back of the room, you're having a little difficulty hearing or seeing, we do have the forum on upstairs on the televisions and computers upstairs. We're going live to YouTube tonight. And so if any of you want to make yourself comfortable upstairs, you're more than welcome to. In the meantime, we'll move on to our second topic. And the second topic of the night is the federal government's relationship with First Nations and Aboriginal people. The Assembly of First Nations has identified 51 ridings across Canada where Aboriginal voters could make the most difference, and the riding of Cariboo-Prince George is included in that list. Last year, this riding was home to the Tsilhqot'in decision. The ruling clearly gives the Tsilhqot'in First Nation title over 440,000 hectares of land to the south and west of Williams Lake, and sets a precedent for other lands throughout the province. Another element at play is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission into residential schools, which has released 94 calls to action to improve the relationship between Aboriginal people and the rest of Canada. Now, we reached out to the Carrier-Secondie Tribal Chief Terry Teegee for this question, and he gave us this. What do you plan to do as a follow-up to the Tsilhqot'in decision to recognize title for First Nations? Furthermore, do you plan to fully implement the 94 recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Report? And I'll add to that, if you'd like to highlight what your specific priorities in this area would be, that would also be appreciated. So I'm going to ask Tracy Kalageros to start us off on the answering for that question.
The Tsilhqot'in decision is an important decision. It follows on many former decisions that have come through the courts over and over again, and what this does is further define what's required for First Nations to identify Aboriginal title, and it makes it very clear that true consultation and negotiation is the only way forward when it comes to any sort of resource or land use development in areas that are unceded by treaty. For BC, that's an awful big part of what our province is. So from the non-First Nation investor who's looking to do development, it can be seen as a barrier because there's other parts of Canada where there's large tracts of land that have already been ceded to treaty, and so they're not subject to the ruling coming out of Tsilhqot'in. From the federal perspective, I think that it goes back to building trust. There's a long history of mistrust between First Nations and government as well as industry, and the federal government is in a position to renegotiate that relationship nation to nation across the country. The Liberal Party is very familiar with the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations. They've gone through it in excruciating detail, and they agree with the bulk of it. Their interest is in implementing the recommendations coming out of that, primarily in consultation with First Nations. The Missing and Murdered Aboriginal Women Inquiry is another commitment that Justin Trudeau has made, and he has committed to doing so immediately upon taking office. So I think the important thing to realize when it's any sort of discussion around this legal decision or the Truth and Reconciliation Report is that they are very, very high on the radar list, and they are very important to all Canadians as we move forward, and the Liberal Party is committed to developing that relationship in a way that makes sense.
Next to answer on this, Sheldon Clare.
Thank you. I spent a little bit of time down in the Tsilhqot'in talking to people about this particular situation down there, and what I found that rather surprised me is that there's a lot of mistrust, anger, and concern on all parties, both the native and non-native community. And there's a lot of confusion about exactly what the decision means. And I think that there is a real need for the federal government to look into building bridges with the peoples down there about how and what this decision means for everyone affected. There are a lot of people who are concerned about their guide outfitting operations, their commercial operations and so on, and their relationship with the First Nations in those areas. The First Nations people are also concerned about how they can develop their title and to be able to use this to turn this into economic benefit for their communities. This is an important aspect of this particular decision. The decision is made. The title is recognized. That's a fact of it. But how this is implemented within the community and how you build bridges with people is really an important part of this decision that the federal government needs to take a serious role in making sure that this plays out to the benefit of all concerned. Because if it doesn't do that, it's going to be trouble in the Tsilhqot'in. That's what I'm hearing from people down there, and that concerns me greatly. One of the things that we have to watch about when we say consultation, we also have to make sure we understand that with consultation comes some accommodation. It's not just, okay, we talk to you and that's good enough. There really has to be a serious effort to listen to people and to take into consideration their real needs and concerns. And in this, communication is the key, and I believe I'm the person to deliver the communication that's needed to build these relationships.
I'll go to Richard Jakes next.
Okay.
You're up.
You're jumping all over the place today,
I know.
aren't you?
I know. Keep me
Jeez.
on your toes.
It's like school, Richard. It's like school.
Thank you, Sheldon. We've had a bit of a growing battle. We're enjoying each other's company immensely. It's strange when we're sitting at the electoral office, we're still sitting side by side. But he's at the right end of the table, so we'll leave it at that. Sorry, Sheldon. You know it was coming. Anyway, the word that keeps coming up, and everyone keeps talking, Sheldon mentioned accommodation, Tracy mentioned consultation. The Supreme Court said in 9 separate decisions the word is consent, not consultation. You must seek their consent in order to move forward with any resource management. The First Nations in the Cariboo-Prince George represent 16.9% of the voter base. These people cannot be forgotten. Their vote will carry the day moving forward. As far as the missing and murdered women's inquiry, I have spoken to Murray Sinclair, and I have reassured him that if I do become a member of Parliament, I will institute the 94 recommendations on the very first day. I'm not the first 100 days. The other people that seem to be forgotten are the missing and murdered men, and not only Native women, but also Caucasian women and the teenagers. We're forgetting a whole other place. I think a lot more could have been done. Over the last 6 years, the federal government cut over $200 million from the RCMP's funding. That affects policing. Police cannot do their jobs and look into the highway of tears without funding to do the job. So moving forward, we have put on our platform the Council of Canadians, where the First Nations will be at the table with us, moving forward with every decision we move forward with. It is a nation-to-nation relationship, and to move forward on traditional territories, we need to seek their consent. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And I'll come to Adam DeCrone next.
I think with the Conservative government we've had over the last 4 years, there's essentially been a canyon between the government and the First Nations. I think first step is to reestablish communication between the government and the First Nations, establish an open dialogue, have a government that is willing to hear their concerns, and not just hear their concerns, but take their concerns seriously. On the missing and murdered women, I totally support an inquiry. And if I was elected as your member of Parliament, I would vote for that. Thank you.
And we'll give Trent Derrick the last word on this one.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to the Tsilhqot'in decision, I met with the First Nations leaders down there, and part of the first priorities they actually want to be is they want to be recognized as equals. The First Nations have gone to court 9 times to the Supreme Court since the Conservatives have been in power. They've won 9 decisions, but there's been no action on those decisions. And how we bring this together is we need to come together and have those open discussions. Tom Mulcair has promised that he would actually be the leader of a board and chair to say, you know what, I'm going to meet with First Nations as nation to nations. With that, though, there's some concerns to rebuild that trust up, and that is when it comes to the truth and reconciliation, education is part of that platform. And Tom Mulcair has promised to raise funds for education for First Nations. Currently, 69 cents. First Nations get 69 cents for every dollar for non-First Nations kids. He wants to bring that up dollar for dollar because we're all Canadian citizens and we deserve the same education. Also, when it comes to the rest of the 94 recommendations, we've promised to come together and bring the key stakeholders because it's going to take time and it's going to take a plan and we're going to have to implement that plan. So we're going to bring First Nations leaders together and say, what are your priorities? What is the strategies we need to implement this? With that, to rebuild those relationships, we also want to make sure that we want to implement the inquiry for missing and murdered women within the first 100 days. And why 100 days? Because it takes time to do things right. It takes time to bring the key stakeholders together. Because if we're going to do this, we need to do it properly. And that's how we build the relationships, is taking the time, get to know each other, and reestablish relationships of trust. Thank you.
Thank you to each of you on that. We're going to move on to our third topic, but we mentioned the fact that a lot of these candidates are very busy, obviously, during the course of a campaign, even one as long as this, and they're running around to all kinds of different meetings and candidate forums and so forth. So I just want to take a moment before we carry on to let you know about a couple of upcoming candidate forums, if you'd like to find out more about these candidates. On October 7th, Stand Up for the North holds an all-candidates meeting with a focus on Bill C-51. That's at the College of New Caledonia. So that is October 7th. And then I also want to acknowledge the fact that some of our media colleagues from the other media here in town are here tonight with us as well. And the Citizen, CKPG, the Chamber of Commerce, and UNBC are all holding a debate for both ridings, both the Cariboo-Prince George and the Prince George Peace River Northern Rockies riding. That's coming up on Thursday, October 8th. At UNBC. So there's another opportunity for you to get to know these candidates again. So we'll talk about some other candidate forums here as we move along this evening. I just want to call Councillor Garth Frizzell up here for a moment, if you wouldn't mind, because the third topic tonight is focused on the federal government's relationship with local government. And according to a report released in 2012, local government collects just 8 cents of every dollar in Canada, while being responsible for roads, sewers, and other vital infrastructure. So, on this topic, we've invited the Prince George Councillor Garth Frizzell to pose a question for the candidates. Garth.
Thank you, Russell, and I want to acknowledge my council colleagues, Councillor Kohler, Councillor Tsilhqot'in, who are here tonight. I'm going to be asking a question that's being asked across Canada. I'm part of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and we have a project, hometownproud.ca, where we're calling upon federal candidates all across Canada to make a federal commitment to municipalities and local governments. That deals with everything from municipal infrastructure to affordable housing, policing, environmental sustainability, and global municipal connections. So the question I'm going to be asking is the same one that I've sent in letters to all 5 of you. And in this case, Canada's municipalities have consistently demonstrated they get shovels in the ground quickly on major infrastructure projects. In the next federal election, we need further commitment to ensure long-term, predictable, and sustainable investment in local infrastructure to build a stronger economy for all Canadians. What is your plan?
Thank you, Councillor Frizzell. What is your plan, Richard Jakes?
Wow.
We'll start with you.
I haven't even had time to doodle yet. You guys are way ahead of me. Okay, start doodling, quick.
I'll doodle.
Yeah, you doodle. All right. The Green Party has put forward our platform September 16th, which was completely costed out ahead of all the other parties because I was at the release myself with Elizabeth May. Civic infrastructure is definitely one that's on the top of our board. What we have dedicated is we're going to take that GST, which seems to just go into general revenue all the time. We're going to take 2 points of that, 2% of that GST, and we are going to convert that into $6.4 billion annually on the average, and we are going to send that to municipalities, the civic municipalities, for infrastructure upgrades for your sewer, your water, street upgrades. The other thing that I do like seeing in the area is the improvements, and safety is important to me, especially highway safety, and it is great to see that the highways in this area are actually being improved, and we're dedicating more money toward the provincial treasury to upgrade the provincial highways, i.e. twinning the Highway 97 South and Highway 16 West. Both highways need upgrades. I'm glad to see it. I'm sure a lot of you can appreciate we do a lot of traveling. And yeah, it's quite a long trip between Prince George and Williams Lake at this time of year because of the construction, but I'm glad to see it. I don't mind sitting in traffic checking emails because I know safety is first and foremost moving forward. So once again, the Green Party is putting forward $6.4 billion by taking 2 points of the GST and reinvesting it in civic infrastructure. Thank you.
And next, it's Trent.
Yeah, I think first off, when you're starting to talk about municipalities and provincial and the tax structure, I think what first thing is that's been missing with the current Conservative government is they haven't shown up to the table. Prime Minister Harper hasn't been there to meet with the premiers, and he hasn't come to any of the municipality meetings. We're committed to that because we need to bring the stakeholders together. We need to talk to the provinces. We need to work with municipalities. Currently, with our plan, we have 1 cent from every of the current gas tax to reinvest into infrastructure. We're committed to creating $1.5 billion. But with that, we're not going to dictate on how that money is spent. We're going to work with the provinces. We're going to work with the local municipalities and say what works best for you. That money is for you. It's for you to reinvest in, and that's how you plan. You need to work together as a group. But first off, it starts with listening. What are your needs? How can we come together? And how can we bring the stakeholders together to reinvest in our communities? Thank you.
Thank you, Trent. And we'll go to Sheldon next.
Thank you. In a riding that's the size of the Czech Republic, I think we have to pay attention to more than just communities. We have to look at our rural areas as well, and we have to realize that there's a great need for proper infrastructure throughout this riding and not just in the cities. I know that potholes are a federal responsibility from the point of the question, but I'm prepared to work with anyone who is prepared to look at proper funding models to make sure that our infrastructure needs are met. And this means making sure that municipalities are following the steps to responsibly repair and replace on a schedule. And I know this city council does that. They have a schedule, they follow it, and they do reinvigorate. But when you see the types of things that can happen suddenly, like sinkholes on Winnipeg Street and so on, these are kinds of things that are important in communities and draw a lot of attention. Well, what's my plan? Well, my plan is to make sure I watch whatever party is in government, because it isn't going to be my party that's in government. I'm going to be an independent. I'm going to be the critical thinker in the room that isn't going to be reading from talking points. I'm going to be the one that has to figure out what plan is the one that is the best, and to make my input by listening to the communities in this region and finding what their needs are to make critical changes to improve our infrastructure. And it's not just about our major communities, it's about the small ones as well, because quite frankly, they don't have the resources of a larger tax base. And when you're looking at spending, there are 3 ways you can sort things out to pay for things. You either increase your taxes, that's one, you cut spending from something else, or you increase your tax base to be able to fund the projects appropriately. Everything you do has to be derived from those particular situations. So how you do that, how you pay for it, that's what I'm interested in.
Thank you, Sheldon. We'll give Adam DeCrona a turn next.
I think communication is key. We need a government that will communicate with communities and say, look, what do you need? Because at the end of the day, who knows better, a politician in Ottawa or the local community. The government needs to open up communication with local communities to find out what it is that is most important to them. And I would support increased federal funding for infrastructure projects, including highways. I would like to see personally a lot more four-laning done. I was driving out recently towards Smithers. I know this is just out of the riding, it's past Vanderhoof, but they were adding a passing lane. That, to me, that's wasted money. Instead of spending all that time in construction on adding a single passing lane, they could have done four-laning. So I think highways are a key, and as your elected representative, I would work with the community to find out what it is most important to this community and to the other communities in this riding in terms of infrastructure so we can get the job done.
Last word on this to Tracy.
So before I even decided to run, I started talking to municipal leaders. It goes beyond municipalities. We're talking about rural areas for sure. We're talking about all types of government, First Nations government, as well as regional districts, because I wanted to know what was on their wish lists. They know better than I do what's needed in their particular geopolitical boundary. I was in Quesnel last night at the open house for the Twin Arenas project, and Bob Simpson was telling me that that project was actually originally slated to be a much larger multi-purpose facility, but he couldn't get the federal government at the table. So what would have been a $30 million project wound up falling off the table because they just couldn't get that component of the funding. He was very specific about who hadn't shown up to the table, but we'll leave that to Bob Simpson. So now they're doing an $18 million arena-only project, which doesn't serve Quesnel, and in the end run, they will do these other projects down the road at a greater cost because not only will the expenses around construction be higher, but there's always synergies and cost savings to be found when you can do a multi-purpose facility. The Liberal government will not be a barrier to development in communities. The Liberal government is very interested in empowering communities to be able to do the projects that they know are going to serve them best. The fact of the matter is we're in a recession. Money is cheap in a recession. It's the time to borrow. Justin Trudeau has been honest with all of us in saying we're going to run minor deficits. Now, I can't believe I'm saying a $10 billion deficit is a minor number because the billion part of that just freaks me out. But when you look at that in comparison to our GDP and our total economy, it isn't even material, as my accountant friends will tell me. It's a very small percentage. So infrastructure funding at $60 billion over the next 20 years, directed to municipalities to be governed by the individuals and the communities and the organizations. That's the best solution in my view.
Thank you all. Did she talk to you directly?
No, I don't ever do that.
No, we don't
See, those are the rules. However, just so you know, we're doing pretty good for time, and we've got we've just passed the halfway point, so we've got about 3 questions left on the evening. So the next one is also on the topic of cities and infrastructure. There's a topic put forward by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in this election, the topic of housing. And certainly that's something that's been on the mind of listeners to our show Daybreak, which of course you can hear 6 a.m. to 8:30, Monday to Friday, 91.5 FM. Shameless. Thank you very much. If there's a few CBC listeners here, thank you very much. That's what you're funding. All right. So we asked one of our listeners we asked our listeners to send us some questions. So this is one we received from Hilda Dockrell. She writes, all the candidates talk about the middle class. How about the people, their families, and children that live in poverty? And Hilda goes on to point out to reports of homelessness, millions a year, and it's related to the number of issues including policing, healthcare, and so forth. Why has no one developed a national plan to eliminate homelessness? So I'm going to start with each of you here just to get your thoughts on this subject. How about people living in poverty across this country? Adam Crone, I'll get you to start us off.
One thing I would support, which I think is definitely the way we need to go, is increase the federal income tax exemption for low-income individuals. Now, when I say low-income individuals, I'm thinking making a federal income tax exemption all the way up to people who earn about $30,000 to $35,000 per year. I come into a lot of contact with a lot of people working minimum wage jobs, single parents with families, and you know, by the time that they pay their bills, they pay their rent, they pay for their car insurance, they have almost nothing left. And yet, we are taxing these people. They are paying 15% income tax on everything they earn over $11,000. So, as a tax relief there, that 15% might not seem like a lot. It definitely is not a lot to the federal government, but to them, that is a lot. To them, that extra 15% of that $20,000 they're earning can make a big difference, and they can invest it wisely. So I think that's definitely one thing we can do.
Next, we'll go to the Liberal Party.
It's a big question, and 2 minutes isn't a whole lot of time. Poverty isn't just about the bricks and mortar and the roof you put over your head. It's systemic and it's pan-generational in some cases now. We have downloaded a lot of the responsibility for providing social supports to charities and to volunteers. When I started in the charitable industries back in 1992, it's probably before you were born, Adam. Yeah, for me.
Reply to that.
I'm good with that. Most of the funding for the charity I was working for at the time, the museum, was coming out of the federal and provincial governments. Well, that has diminished and diminished and diminished. So it started by diminishing at the federal level, so the province picked up the slack. Then it stepped down from the provincial level, and the municipalities have picked up the slack. And then the municipalities, in our case in particular, have moved that out into the regional district. But when you're thinking about organizations like the Fire Pit or the Phoenix Transition Home, they are using their employees essentially now to bear the brunt of those costs. So I think the responsibility on the federal level has to be to properly fund our social infrastructure in order to be able to help people get to the point where they can start to break the cycle of poverty. Education is a big part of it, and support for education at all levels is vital, and the federal government has a role to play there as well. I talked to Leo Hebert for a while at the Métis Housing Society, and we talked a lot about safe homes for people and providing new places for people to start over. And the infrastructure program that the Liberals have announced does target low-income housing as well as rental units. And I think that's a place to start, but the conversation goes far beyond 2 minutes and far beyond bricks and mortar.
I'll let Richard go next.
Thank you. I'm going to speak to First Nations housing because I do have some personal experience with it as an educator living on the First Nation and teaching. I can tell you that I did live in a teachridge that had no siding and it was minus 42 out. My furnace never shut off, and some days I wouldn't have water or heat. Other buildings on First Nations, i.e. the educational institutions, I remember having no running water and cardboard for windows. This is a reality in 2013 and 2014. Homelessness, it's not just the homeless. You have to define the homeless. Now the homeless, looking at the numbers of homeless seniors has gone up to 5.8% already. And this is completely unacceptable across the board. We have a national housing strategy that we're looking at. We're looking at a guaranteed livable income. What we're looking at with those who are disadvantaged or just can't work anymore or unable to work or disabled is that we'll roll the CPP back so they can start collecting their CPP. On top of that, we want to roll the old age security back and combine that with the CPP. Along with that is the old age guaranteed income supplement and roll that back into the CPP. Therefore, it guarantees them a guaranteed livable income. If you put those all together, it works out to about $18,000 a year, which is a good investment in our elders and our seniors, and along with the homeless people. Now, right now, First Nations, I can tell you that the Conservative government has held back $2.8 billion for First Nations housing. There are people who've been living in hotels and motels for 3 years because of flood damage, and their houses have not been rebuilt. So it is a big issue. Like Tracy said, we could sit here all night and talk about housing in the cities, housing on the reserves. It is a huge problem. So, oh, there's the 10-second warning. Again, I appreciate the question. I wish we had more time, but I'm available after to talk about the housing policy that we have. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. The NDP, Trent Derrick.
Thank you, and I think this is one of the issues where you need to bring all stakeholders to the table as well, provincial municipalities and the federal government. It's something where when you look at it, you need to take a look at the whole picture, and you need to meet the immediate needs of those who are facing housing crisis, as well as looking at the problems that are causing us there. The NDP does have a plan. When we're taking a look at it to meet the immediate needs, we have a plan in place to build 10,000 low-income housing for seniors right off the bat. We also want to place 3,400 beds for women fleeing abuse and refund the programming there. We also, when we're taking a look at the downloading of funding and who's affecting it the most, is we need to reinvest in healthcare. $36 billion has been cut by the Conservative government to healthcare. And we also want to take a look at building universal pharmacare. These are all steps that help reduce poverty and help allow people, because people are choosing between life-saving medicine or paying their rent or paying for food. With that is also, we do have a plan in place to help seniors and reduce and remove 200,000 seniors out of poverty. And we're going to do that by re-looking at the CPP, what we're paying into that, and also look into what premiums are paid for old age security. And one of the ones when we're taking a look at looking at the root causes of it, and this is one that I'm really proud of and something that I really want to take ownership, is we're going to work with a mental health strategy for youth and invest in healthcare services for youth. So when we take a look at it, we look at the steps that start and get and cause people to be in poverty. So we're taking a look at the whole picture, and you need to take care of the immediate needs, but also take the steps to not allow people to enter poverty. And starting with mental health is a great step. Thank you.
And Sheldon gets the final word on this one, the independent candidate.
Thank you. As an educator of 23 years, if I didn't say that there needed to be more access to education for more people, I would be entirely remiss. That's certainly something that needs to happen to alleviate poverty, is provide educational opportunities for more people so that there are opportunities there so they don't get into situations. Certainly mental health needs more attention. I completely agree with that. And I don't believe that care homes should be places where seniors are sent to warehouse until they die. That's not what should be happening. Our elder citizens have earned their time, they have earned what they have done. But we also have a huge financial problem. We have the same number of people under 16 who are presently over 65 in this country. And we need a way to make sure that we can pay for the services that so many of my colleagues here want to spend all this money on. If we create deficit spending, all we're going to be doing is passing on that debt to our descendants, and that is not a solution to the problem. I would argue that will make the problem worse in the future. So what we really need to do here is come up with a better way forward to make sure that we can pay for what we're doing, that we have a good national strategy that supports communities, supports the provinces, and delivers help to people where they need it, when they need it. Our veterans certainly have a crisis associated with this as well. A lot of people I know personally who've gone off to serve their country in recent conflicts, not just older ones, have come back quite different. And there needs to be a way to make sure that their needs are also met. And having the offices closed down, not being able to provide the support and services, and having only one person to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder in the entire province is simply not acceptable. It's also not acceptable for Service Canada to just send people over to our local branch of the Royal Canadian Legion to get services that they can't provide federally, which is their responsibility. So housing, yes, let's make sure that people have homes. They need homes, but also let's make sure that they have the ability to participate in the economy as productive citizens so they can afford what they need. Thank you.
Can I have a chance to rebut? He did accuse us of going in debt, and that's a shot at all of our colleagues.
I did. That's nothing specific there, Trent.
I'll tell you what. I think we said at the outset, if it's something directed to a specific candidate, that's what we do. So, to be absolutely fair. Now, I know a couple of our candidates have talked about this, and this is worth pointing out that yes, we have given 2 minutes apiece to this, and certainly 10 minutes per subject may not even scratch the surface on these things. But I'm sure that some of you have a lot more to say. I won't speak on behalf of all the candidates, but some of them may be available to talk about this one-on-one after. And there are certainly other candidate forums that are happening throughout the balance of this election writ, and I just want to call attention to 2 others that are going on. There's one on October 13th, and this is at the Prince George Native Friendship Center. It's hosting an all-candidates forum on October 13th, and the focus is on Aboriginal issues that night. And then on October 14th, just down the highway in Hickson, our neighbors there are hosting a riding debate as well, and the topic is rural living and agriculture, farming and ranching, also a big part of that. So you may see some of these candidates at that. Certainly anyone you support or looking to support will probably keep you up to date on where they're appearing and when. So we're going to, that's right, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All right, so we're going to move on to question 6 and our next topic. I'm just going to call Shelley Stafford, who's the chair of the Library Board of Trustees, forward to ask a question. And I'll come down to you, Shelley, because it's a little tricky to get up here. So this is our final section of the night. And Shelley, come on over here with me, just so they can see you on the YouTube. And go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. The Canadian Library Association, representing libraries across the country, has stated its concern with the elimination of the long-form census. Municipalities such as ours need reliable data from Statistics Canada to be able to track trends and plan for the future. What is your position on the reinstatement of the long-form census?
All right. Thank you, Shelley. So on behalf of the libraries, they're asking about the long-form census, and we'll start at the top again with Sheldon. Sheldon Clare, independent candidate. What's your position on the reinstatement of the long-form census?
I completely support the return of the long-form census. You cannot make intelligent, informed decisions about where tax dollars need to be allocated without having a really good picture of your community and of the people who live in it. It's egregious that it was canceled, and it was canceled for purely silly ideological reasons that make absolutely no sense to anyone who believes in science, research, and the need to know information that will help to fund and allocate our tax dollars responsibly. I hope my answer is clear.
Adam DeCrone of the Christian Heritage Party.
Absolutely, I support a long-form census for basically the same reasons Sheldon just mentioned. If we're going to spend the money to go ahead and do a census and collect the data, we need to ensure that we're getting accurate and enough data to allocate those tax dollars wisely.
Tracy Kalageros of the Liberal Party.
Working in a museum, I'm all about information and collecting information and keeping it for a really long time. But I can tell you that I have an awful lot of people come to us every day, every week. Bob Campbell's in here, and he'd be the first to say, oh yes, wanting information that is the kind that's collected in a long-form census. Removing it was ridiculous, and the Liberal Party would reinstate it immediately.
Trent Derrick of the NDP.
Yeah, so the long-form census was just another attack on information gathering. I work for Service Canada, where we house the National Archives. It was very hurtful and very attack on our very structures of knowledge, and to see that the cuts back to that library. But with the long-form census, we do need it. It's a part of making educated decisions. It's also how we can implement research and development, and that's part of our plan. So the long-form census is a key part of making key educated decisions on moving forward in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Trent. And Richard Jakes of the Green Party.
The long-form census was Canada's barometer. I can remember, like many of you, sitting at the kitchen table with this great package of paper and checking off boxes one after the other. We used to drive ourselves crazy doing it. However, sitting up here and relying upon that data for federal expenditure we need that long-form census back. How can we possibly serve the families and what the families need, and or seniors or veterans or all of you in this room, without knowing what your needs are? And the long-form census was that data, and we want to reinstate that immediately. Thank you.
Short form answers on the long form census. All right. Excellent. There you go. All right, the last softball of the night. This is our last question, and it's about local representation. This is something that I've asked, each of you have been kind enough to appear on Daybreak over the last couple of weeks, and one of the things that I've asked all the candidates in all 3 northern BC ridings is about what they'll bring to Ottawa. Because it's not only about being a voice in Ottawa, but what kind of voice we bring to Ottawa. And certainly this is one of the most distant ridings from Ottawa. It's certainly up there, and it's certainly a long way from where you're expected to sit in the House of Commons. Western politicians consistently have high expenses, travel expenses. And that's certainly across the board. That's not party specific. So our question is, what's your plan or commitment to remain a resident of Prince George or other parts of the riding while you're an active representative in Ottawa? So, why don't we go in reverse order from where we started? Adam DeCrone, I'll let you answer this first.
If elected as your representative, I am committed to staying here in the Cariboo-Prince George riding. I have lived in Quesnel almost my entire life. I have family there. I love the area, love the people. There's nowhere else in BC probably that I'd rather be than in the Cariboo-Prince George riding, so I would be committed to staying here. I definitely wouldn't want to go live in Ottawa or anywhere else.
We'll understand if you get an apartment there. It's perfectly okay. It might be necessary, just so you know.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Richard Jakes, Green Party.
Oh boy, here we go. Having lived in the north, in Fort St. James, Takla, Tache, Prince George, myself and Sherry had discussed moving back to Prince George. We were up here about a few weeks ago looking at houses in College Heights, so I love Prince George. I think it's a great city. I do plan on residing in the riding, not near a golf course near the U.S. border. However, if you do want to represent the riding, you could at least show up for a debate. I'm a baseball fan, and we're going to sing the baseball songs. 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. You know, take your name off the ballot. That's enough. I've had it. Whether you live here or not, it's unacceptable. But moving forward, yes, I plan on residing in the riding, either in Prince George. However, there are some of my relatives in Williams Lake say you should live in Williams Lake, so it's a bit of a toss-up. So, but I do have relations in Williams Lake and in Prince George, so yeah, you're coming to sneak on my microphone again, aren't you? What are you up to? Oh, okay. Do you notice the signs get bigger as they come this way? It's almost like little bowls of porridge. Then we get to Adam on the end here. Sorry about that. It's been a long day.
It's been a long So I picked Prince George off a map in 1992 because it was in the middle. I'd never been out west. I loaded up a cube van. I drove out here with no job and a ferret and a bunch of dogs and cats. And I completely fell in love with a place. I also fell in love with a man and got married and had kids here. As I've told you several times, I've been at the museum for 22 years. I hunt here, I fish here, I jet boat here. I'm not leaving. I love this area, and the reason I'm running this time around is because I couldn't take not having a representative anymore. I couldn't take the Harper government in charge anymore, and I wanted us to have a say. I wanted us to have a voice in Ottawa. I think that's me. I've got a voice and I'm prepared to use it, always have been. And I'm also prepared to build a consensus. So I absolutely am not going anywhere. Yes, I probably would get an apartment in Ottawa because I don't want to live in a hotel. But other than having to fly a whole lot, it doesn't matter to me. I want to be here. Actually, I was thinking about buying some sort of a recreational vehicle that would allow me to spend time in all of the communities, but my home base is here.
Well, I think it goes without saying that I love this riding. I've spent 32 of my 40 years in this riding, 10 years in Hickson, so it's given me a broad perspective of urban and rural issues as well. But most importantly, I have investments in this community. I have 2 businesses here. I've grown up here. I've gone to school here, and this is my home. And that's what I'm going to take to Ottawa as well. I'm going to take that sense of pride that I'm going to stand up and say, you know what, we live in the best riding in Canada. And this is what we have to offer. And that's what I want to be. I want to be that voice that says, you know what, this is who we are, this is what we offer, and this is what this is what my constituents want. And so am I going to live here? Of course. It's a beautiful place.
Easy to say that, yes, you know, this is my home. I was born here in 1962. I've been here a while. My family came here in 1930. I'm not going anyplace. And when I fly in, I look down and I see the various shades of green, and I go, I'm at home. But let's think about one other thing that is a factor for Western MPs, the divorce rate. The divorce rate is extremely high among those Western MPs who have to spend so much time away from home. And I'm not joking about this. And I've got to say, despite our political differences, I have a modicum of respect for Bob Zimmer, who moved his family out to Ottawa to avoid that problem. You know, I think that's something you have to think about. So every person is going to have a different situation based on their family, and you have to take that into consideration. This is my home, and this is where I'll stay. But let's think about everybody's situation differently. There's no pat answer to this question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheldon. Okay, so we're going to wrap up the night. This will be an opportunity for you to summarize everything you've said so far, or cover anything off that you haven't mentioned so far. If you're elected on October 19th, you'll be asked, of course, to balance your own personal beliefs against the beliefs of your party, or perhaps even the desires of your constituents.
Yes.
You'll be having to work with some 330-odd other elected people to make that happen. So our final question of the evening is this: how will you strike that balance? What will be your guiding principles and beliefs as you're called on to vote on issues shaping our country, indeed our riding, and how willing are you to stand up against the popular opinion, whether that's here at home or in the House of Commons? How effective do you think you can be, even if you're not a member of the government party? So, in short, why should people cast their vote for you? We'll start in reverse order again from where we started at the beginning of the night. So Adam DeCrone of the Christian Heritage Party, would you start us off?
Well, as some of my colleagues have pointed out before, a lot of the major parties have party whips that force their MPs to vote a certain way on a lot of issues. One example of this we can see is Bill C-51. When that passed, every Conservative voted for it. Every Liberal voted for it, and every NDP candidate and Green Party candidate voted against it. It was entirely on party lines. I'm not confined to those strict party lines. In my party policy book, it says that party loyalty must take the backseat to serving the electorate who've placed the MPs in that position. So, in short, I am more flexible than the larger parties in what I can do for you. I will have flexibility to consult with people in this riding on what they want to say to me as MP and what they want me to bring to Ottawa for the message. And that should be a lot easier since I plan on residing in the riding. But one of the main things I would bring to Ottawa and represent strongly is an opposition to government intrusion into freedom and privacy. For me, that is one of the biggest issues this election. I think it should be an important issue every election. I don't agree with the Conservative candidate in Alberta, who last week, when sticking up for Bill C-51, said they already have too many damn rights. That's Conservative MP from Calgary Signal Hill said that last week. That's what he was quoted saying. So I disagree with that, and I think I will be the strongest voice in Ottawa for your freedom, your privacy, and your issues. October 19, vote Adam DeCrone.
And I should mention, in fact, one of the things that we're going to do with these final moments is give you a little extra time. So 2.5 minutes to everybody at the end here. Obviously, you'll be watching Andrew for the cards. So we did extend the same privilege to you, Adam. So Richard Jakes of the Green Party, you're next, sir.
I think myself and Sheldon should be talking about who's whipped around here. I'm starting to feel a little bit whipped there, Russell. You're not letting us much off the leash, are you? Anyway, going to Ottawa, which I fully intend to do, Elizabeth has made it quite clear that the Green Party is not a whip party. We vote our conscience. We are allowed to vote our conscience when we do meet with her. She says, I want to hear what your voters are saying. I want to know what their opinions are. Don't hold anything back. I can't move forward without knowing what's going on out there. So in Ottawa, I plan on speaking your voice from the rafters if I have to. It's important that your voice is carried to Ottawa. I think that everyone deserves a voice in Ottawa, and I don't like the whip system. You've seen the Conservatives here. There's a national whipped silence. They're not showing up for debates anywhere. There was only one Conservative candidate that I know in British Columbia that actually showed up for a debate. He took abuse for about an hour and a half. He survived it, and they gave him a hand for it, so bravo. At least one of them showed up to support his party platform. No, if you're going to commit to a party platform, again, show up and defend it. Don't go hide behind trees and don't show up for things. So, but moving to Ottawa, I definitely are going to take your voice and your opinions to Ottawa. The Green Party is very aware that we are not going to be the governing party, but we are going to be the party for change. We are going to be that opinion in the corner, that conscience on the shoulder, that is going to make sure that the governing party, be it a minority NDP, Liberal, unfortunately probably not a Conservative, which is a great thing, that we are going to be the conscience of Parliament, and looking forward, I look forward to going to Ottawa. I got yellow carded again. That's okay. I'm starting to feel like a soccer player. I heard that, Sheldon.
Never stopped you before.
Yeah. Anyway, once again, thank you. Vote Green coming up. We are a voice. We're an unwhipped voice, Sheldon. And we are a party, and there is no I in team. So moving forward, we are represented in 337 ridings across Canada. We do have all except one, which is Labrador. We do have a person running in every riding in Canada. Oh, God.
You got the bell!
I got that
It's actually not too bad. We've almost gone an hour and a half, and no one's gotten the cowbell yet. That's remarkable. So my congratulations on getting this far in the evening. Tracy Colajeros of the Liberal Party.
Quick story by way of illustration. One of the things that I like about the Liberal Party is that they'll only whip on 3 issues, and those are confidence issues, traditional things like budget, anything relating to the party platform and the promises that are being made, and anything related to the Charter and Rights and Freedoms. But what I particularly like and what I want to illustrate with this story is back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was the riding president for the riding that was then Prince George Bulkley Valley. And that was during the major leadership debates and contests between Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien and John Manley and Sheila Copps and Malin Rock and anybody else that happened to be a member of the party at the time. But it was very clear that Paul Martin was going to be the winner. And riding presidents were the only people in the country that were not required to commit to which leadership candidate they were going to support prior to going to the leadership convention. So I took the position, I still think it's the right position, that someone smarter than me made that decision to allow for equal access to all potential candidates to all of the members of the party within the riding. So I didn't take a position. And I got a phone call one day from the province asking me why I hadn't signed someone's nomination papers yet. I repeated my stand. It made the province, and I learned on the pages of the province that I was the only riding president in the entire province that hadn't signed Paul Martin's nomination papers. From there came party pressure to bear. I had people in my home. I had people at the riding president's meeting in Vancouver, full-on, full-court press, and I stuck to my guns. I went to the leadership convention, and they had to look to find a ballot that was just had the names on it because there was almost no one in the country that went without having been pre-decided or pre-committed to who they were voting for. And when I put my nomination papers in this time around, I thought, well, they certainly know that I stuck to my guns once before, regardless of the pressure that was placed upon me. I wonder if they'll greenlight me. Well, they did greenlight me. And that says to me that this is a party that is about opinion, and it's about individual thought and principled positions, and they're prepared to listen and to talk and go in with that open mind, not some preconceived notion. So that's who I am, and that's the voice you'll get if you send me to Ottawa.
Trent Derrick of the New Democratic Party.
I think it's important to realize what system we're in right now. When we talk about the system, the party system, it is a system that is in place, and we need to work within that system. When we're talking about the voice of being the party, and it comes out to proportional representation. When we talk about that. And we're going to change that. It changes how people are electing. We're going to change the role of the MP. And I think that's very important when we talk about democracy and freedom, is that we need an entire voice. And that's very important when it comes to this upcoming election. And that's something that I'm going to champion. It's something that our party is there. When it comes to me as an individual, I'm a hard worker. And I want to go out into the communities and listen and be your voice. And I want an example is that I'm the only candidate that has 3 campaign offices, one in Prince George, one in Williams Lake, one in Quesnel. And the reason for that is because I want to be known as to represent our entire riding. And that's who I am. I'm the guy that wants to bring those ideas together, be that voice, stand up for everyone. And it makes access to me greater as well. So when I'm in those communities, I'm able to get the messages from the people. And having those meetings, I was able to pull ideas together, because that's what you do as an MP. You need to be able to listen to someone from Williams Lake and talk to someone in Prince George and say, you know what, how do those two fit? And with that in mind, the way to do that is you need to be in the community, and you need offices in those communities in order for people to feel comfortable to come in. And that's what I offer. I want to be offered to go out, listen, and work hard on your behalf. Thank you.
Sheldon Clare, independent candidate, you have the last word.
Thank you. I had the first word, too. That's a good switch for me. I get to open and close. I'm running because I believe the party system is fundamentally flawed. I believe it is fundamentally broken, and it does not lead to good representation for communities and people. I believe that when you go and vote on October 19th and in the advance polls, you are selecting a representative, one of 338 in the country, who will be the best voice for your community, for your region. You need to look at that ballot very carefully. You need to ask yourself, who is that best choice? Who is the person who has the strongest voice, who will get the attention that this area deserves and needs to be able to make the changes that should happen here? Who is that person that best represents your values? Who is that person that will be the person to be the voice for Cariboo-Prince George in Ottawa? I believe I'm that person. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm very good at getting attention. And you will see that I will bring attention to this riding. I know that this riding has been ignored for the most part, for the last 40 years or more. And that is simply not acceptable. It's not acceptable to elect just another party backbencher. You need someone who's going to get attention and who's going to demonstrate that this is not a pocket borough. This is not a safe seat. If we think this is a safe seat and people keep voting the same way they've always voted, you're only going to get the same results. Vote independent on October 19th and in those advanced polls, and you will get real change in this community. I'm the right candidate in the right place at the right time. Vote Sheldon Clare on October 19th. You'll be glad you did.
Well, that brings us to the end of our questions tonight, and I just want to take a moment to say a couple of things. When you're putting together a night like this, there's a number of different formats you can use, a number of different ways of getting the information out. And I just want to acknowledge the person who made all the phone calls, talked to each and every one of these candidates and cajoled them into coming here tonight, and also put together our format and our questions and so forth, because it's easy for me to stand up here and ask these questions when I've got somebody really talented behind me, Mr. Andrew Curiata. And I also want to acknowledge the entire CBC staff here in Prince George who have been so helpful over the course of the last few weeks in putting this together. Jordan Tucker, who's here tonight, Robert Doan, our host producer in absentia, and we've got a good crew there. And so thank you very much for listening each and every morning between 6 a.m. and 8:30, 91.5 FM. And just a quick reminder to our other media colleagues who are organizing another debate on October 8th at UNBC, the Citizens, CKPG, the Chamber of Commerce, and UNBC all sponsoring that debate on Thursday, October 8th. And the next one next week is also Wednesday, October 7th, Stand Up for the North, holding an all-candidates meeting with a focus on Bill C-51, and that's at the College of New Caledonia. Finally, my thank you to the library for having us. Thank you so much for hosting us. You can see the video of this if you want to hear what you sounded like when you applauded. It'll be up on our Facebook page tomorrow. That's facebook.com/daybreaknorth. So look for that probably tomorrow afternoon, and you can watch the debate again and certainly send it out to other people. And many thanks to our candidates. Once again, Sheldon Clare, the Independent. Trent Derrick from the New Democratic Party, Tracy Colligeros from the Liberal Party, Richard Jakes from the Green Party, and Adam DeCrone from the Christian Heritage Party. Thank you for your time, thank you for the respectful debate, and all the best with each of your candidacies. Good night.